In today's video, I'm going to be picking every single Week 6 game of the college football season using this beautiful website, Playoff Predictors. I'll start with the disclaimer I usually start with, which is that I'm not going to be able to give insanely in-depth insight into each matchup. Some of these results we're going to comb over a little bit just because of the sheer volume we're tackling today, but due to popular demand, once again, I'll be making a little bit more of an effort to go in depth to some of the biggest games. So without further ado, let's just get into it. I am super hyped to pick these Week 6 games. Another week where we get further into conference play. The consequences, the stakes, they rise, and it's just a thing of beauty. So we start with a Thursday game, Sam Houston at New Mexico State. I don't know about y'all. This is going to be the only football game I'm watching on Thursday. I don't even know who they've got playing in the NFL. I know that makes me a sicko. Not many other people are thinking about this game, but it's an interesting one. We got Tony Sanchez's New Mexico State squad that has looked actually respectable this season against the Sam Houston squad that's had a really tough early schedule. They're still looking for their first win. It's a razor-tight spread in this one. Could go either way, but I'm honestly really impressed with what I've seen from the Aggies thus far. I think they could be a bowl team in this USA, especially given how weak the bottom tier of that conference looks like it is. So I think Sam Houston stays winless on the year. Phil Longo having some growing pains in his first season as the head coach of Sam Houston. I think New Mexico State gets it done. We've got a nice slate of Friday games. Usually this website is not accurate with their Friday designations, but these games are actually all on Friday. It's a really nice mix of group of 5 action. We got a one Power 5 game in there, or Power 4. Old habits die hard. Starting with Western Kentucky at Delaware, a CUSA battle that's really intriguing, a lot more intriguing than we thought it might look. Delaware was a team we knew could be good in their first season as an FBS program, but they've really blown out expectations. Their only loss thus far is to Colorado. They had a nice road win against FIU last we saw them, and the nice win over UConn as well in overtime. They've been really excellent, and they're off to an undefeated start in conference play. Western Kentucky has looked flawed at times this season. They had the blowout loss to Toledo. That was kind of ugly. They eke out a win versus Missouri State last week. So I do think there's a lot of Delaware buzz, and rightfully so. I think that they can keep it going and get a win. Really, what we might be seeing here is the first year under Tyson Helton at Western Kentucky where all of those portal additions, the staff overhaul they did, maybe not gelling as cleanly as they hoped it would. And for that reason, I think Delaware can get it done. Huge kudos to them for what they've done in their first years in FBS program. I hope they can get a waiver to qualify for a bowl game if the NCAA allows that, because they're currently ineligible for that and also the CUSA conference title game, which now they're in the conversation for because it's their first year. Charlotte headed on the road to play South Florida. Charlotte has been not very inspiring so far this season. I thought they were actually a decent team at the end of 2024, but they've kind of just lost the spark at the start of this year. You've obviously got the new head coach, Tim Albin. Seems like they're working out the kinks here. I knew it was a little bit of a red flag that his coordinators didn't come with them, and there just has not been a lot of juice. South Florida, on the other hand, has had a ton of juice. I expect a very lopsided victory. They're off a bye. They're going to be motivated. They're going to continue this nice start to the season with a nice conference victory. New Mexico heads on the road to play San Jose State. Both teams that could contend to win the Mountain West this year. San Jose State's been off to a disappointing start to the season. They've struggled a little bit at times. They eked out that win over Idaho for their first win of the season. And New Mexico, on the other hand, has had everything go right for them. They've got a rivalry victory. They get the nice win against UCLA on the road. They do have the one loss to Michigan, but even that was a semi-competitive game. So a lot has hit. Jack Lane has been cooking, and New Mexico runs into potentially the first landmine in conference play here. San Jose State is not a bad team. They've got some very respectable players. They can score on you as well. So this one could be intriguing, could honestly go either way, but I'm going to continue to rock with the team that I have liked in New Mexico, even though this one could really flip either way, especially because it's a San Jose State team I was pretty high on. We have not seen what I expected from them thus far in the season. Maybe this is a get-right game for them. West Virginia at BYU is that power conference matchup we've got on this Friday slate. West Virginia has not looked great thus far in year one under Rich Rod. They had the lone spark against Pitt. Rivalry game, the juices were flowing. BYU, such a complete team. They have very much impressed at the start of the season. Not the toughest schedule in the world, but definitely some dynamics that could hurt you. A couple tough road games, and I think Bachmeier continues to look composed, play well, and I think BYU gets another victory. Colorado State at San Diego State, a preview of a future Pac-12 matchup starting next year, but in the meantime, it is a Mountain West matchup. San Diego State guts out an ugly 6-3 victory on the road versus NIU last week. Colorado State gets beat 20-3 by Washington State. You get the feeling that the offenses are both sputtering for both these teams. Going to be a defensive battle. And San Diego State has, I think, outperformed their expectations a little bit thus far. Colorado State has kind of underperformed. I think we're going to see a case of regression and progression to the mean. I think the Rams actually go on the road and make it 2 Mountain West teams getting road victories this week. I think that they are able to beat a San Diego State team that has been playing really well, but I also think Colorado State has a little bit more than maybe what they've shown thus far. I know it's been ugly. I know they almost lost to an FCS opponent, but I do just think the Rams are going to find something this week that kind of springboards them back to their feet, even though San Diego State has the win over Cal. They've had some impressive-looking games against NIU. It was obviously pretty ugly last week. So I look for the Rams to get what would, I believe, be an upset victory. I'm not too familiar with what the spread is there, though. We've got ULM on the road versus Northwestern. Northwestern getting another win last week over UCLA. I believe that's just their second win on the season. This one could get them to 500 against a ULM team that's been really excellent. They've gotten a few decisive victories in games that could have gone either way. They beat Arkansas State. They had the nice win, I believe, versus UTEP as well. So ULM has really been a pleasant team so far this season. Brian Vincent, a great head coach. Is he capable of going on the road versus a power conference opponent and putting together a great enough game to potentially swing the upset? Against Northwestern? Maybe. Northwestern did get beat by 20 against Tulane earlier this year, but that's a pretty solid Tulane team, and this Northwestern team isn't a complete joke. We saw them just put together a very nice performance versus UCLA. So I think Northwestern gets another nice win. Obviously a must-win game for David Braun to get his name off the hot seat. Certainly these wins and the win over UCLA will help that a little bit. And for ULM, this isn't one you have to have. It would be nice to get this victory, especially when you're pushing for that bowl game, but they've already snagged a couple nice wins. I still think they'll push for a bowl game. We'll race to the Saturday games. That was the first Saturday game I picked, I should have mentioned, with a couple Big Ten ones. Minnesota on the road versus Ohio State. Buckeyes a little sluggish on the road versus Washington to start. The offense clearly has some deficiencies, some issues, but at the end of the day, I thought the play calling was actually decent. I just think Sayan has some room to grow. Obviously, those skill players make it a lot easier on him. I think at home against Minnesota, we could see another sluggish start. They just traveled across the country last week to play Washington. They are back home. And Minnesota, not a terrible team. They've shown that they can do some stuff offensively. The defense this year has been a little bit disappointing for the Golden Gophers. They've definitely taken a few tough losses, but that win over Rutgers last week was nice. I think they could definitely put together a spirited half, but Ohio State at the end of the day, too crushing of a defense this year. They're going to suffocate Minnesota, just like they suffocated some excellent skill players for Washington last week and really made that game never really truly a game because Washington just could not break through. Illinois heads on the road to play Purdue. Illinois, a top 25 team still after the nice win over USC in the last second field goal, showing a lot of resilience, a lot of great stuff. But again, the consistency or lack thereof was something that almost bit them a couple of times last year, specifically on the defensive side of the football. It's a bit of a scary game. This is not a Purdue team that's as bad as they were last season. They've got a little bit more fight. We saw that against USC. They haven't truly gotten that win, though, that states we're here and we're not complete terrible, just an afterthought in the Big Ten. So a chance for that kind of win for Barry Odom and company. And this is a team that nearly beat Illinois last year. I think Illinois has to show up composed, ready, motivated, play a clean game, but I think they will do so. I think Altmaier and that Barry Lunny Jr. offense has given every reason to believe in them in a spot like this that they can bounce back. That Indiana win almost feels like it woke this team up a little bit, and I think that's really great for Illinois. Colorado heads on the road to play TCU. TCU, a team coming off their first loss of the season at Arizona State. That was the game I was at last week. And they host a Colorado team that's kind of been up and down this year. I thought the Buffaloes played one of their best games of the year last week, nearly took out BYU, showed some good stuff, showed some fight defensively as well. So not a bad Colorado team this year, even though they've taken a couple losses. TCU, on the other hand, a team that has a very prolific offense. Obviously, they had their struggles against Arizona State. That's a really good Arizona State defense that has given a lot of teams troubles. So I think the Horned Frogs bounce back. I think they have a nice offensive performance against Colorado, but I wouldn't completely write off the Buffaloes at this point in the season. I think they've shown enough fight to give them the benefit of the doubt in a few of these swing games, specifically with what Coach Prime has been able to do in general. I think he deserves the benefit of the doubt. Vanderbilt heads on the road to play Alabama. For many, this is the main event of the weekend just because of the pure storylines involved, the sheer magnitude of the upset last season where Vandy takes out Alabama, and then, like pure poetry, Vanderbilt this year is no longer like a fun Cinderella story where, oh, they lost to Georgia State but beat Alabama. now they're legitimately a good team, like being power rated as a top 20 team, beating up on everybody they play. They've got 2 very impressive road victories thus far. They put together some seriously impressive performances thus far. And the Crimson Tide should be a little worried, especially when you look at the fact that they did beat you last year. They've got a lot of the same personnel. They can run a lot of the same game plans they did. The Crimson Tide could be in a spot where they're in trouble. If Vanderbilt plays their football game, takes care of the football, this is a team that thrives on people underestimating them. Bama's like an 11-point favorite or whatever it is. So the Crimson Tide are going to be picked by a lot of people, including me. I think Simpson has been playing great. I think that Florida State loss really woke this team up. And just like I talked about and hyped them up last week, picking them to beat Georgia, I think they're going to be composed at home, get it done. They barely committed any penalties at Georgia. That was also really impressive. And I don't think this is a letdown spot anymore for them because Vanderbilt's not a team they're overlooking. They do have dangerous playmakers. They do have Diego Pavia. I think Vandy's going to play a pretty clean game too, but I think Alabama gets a win. I don't think it's like a crazy blowout, though. I honestly think Vandy's probably going to cover, and I think Bama just finds a way to get it done thanks to their superior talent roster and their play calling on offense, how things are humming with Simpson right now. Penn State heads on the road to play UCLA. Part of me wants to do a little bit of additional analysis on how UCLA could pull it off, but it doesn't feel super likely. Penn State could come out a little sluggish after an emotional home loss. Now they have to go on the road, kind of a long road trip. UCLA has a talent roster, not terrible, but obviously no head coach. You could argue that under an interim, they could rally, they could play inspired. They just fired their offensive coordinator, Tino Cesare. Maybe there's a spark. I believe it's Jerry Neuheisel, who's now the offensive coordinator. We'll see. I don't have a ton of confidence or faith in UCLA. Nobody should. They look like one of the worst teams, not just in the power conferences, but in college football. Michigan State travels on the road to play Nebraska. The Cornhuskers coming off the bye. Michigan State also coming off the bye. This one, a really intriguing key swing game in the middle of the Big Ten. You know, a lot of people fixate on those top 3 or 4 teams. How's the pecking order going to come out this year? This is an interesting one because it kind of represents like spots 5 through like 10 in the conference. Where are you going to end up in the shuffle? Michigan State's offense has shown a lot of life this season. It's something you've really liked to see from them as they progress this year. If you're looking for a big leap under Jonathan Smith, it has to happen. Or one way or another. It's certainly not happening because of the defense right now. And then you look at Nebraska on the other hand. The Cornhuskers have really delivered on some of the things we thought they could be better at. There's certainly been some flaws, like the offense hasn't necessarily been as humming as some people might have projected it to be. They have their defensive deficiencies, but at home, a Cornhuskers team that is well coached, I think they're able to get it done. I don't know how capable Michigan State is of exposing Nebraska's defense quite to the degree that the Wolverines were able to on the ground at times, and even that was just a couple of big plays. It wasn't like they just completely bullied Nebraska the whole game. There was definitely a bit of a mismatch, though, but I like Nebraska to get the job done at home, get one game closer to bowl eligibility. We got a game in the MAC here, Ohio on the road versus Ball State. Ball State under Mike Aremovich, his first season, things not looking too great. I honestly think Ohio gets it done. Not a ton of issues for the Bobcats, who have looked like the best team in the MAC this season with Parker Navarro, which is really impressive. Their head coach, Brian Smith, it's his first season. They did retain both coordinators from last year and a lot of their roster. It's just really interesting to see what they've managed to do despite having their head coach, Tim Albin, leave during the offseason. Kansas State at Baylor does not have the luster that it had when we looked at this game in the offseason. Kansas State with 3 losses on the season, Baylor with a couple of losses on the year. Both teams have had deficiencies. Really, for Baylor, it's only been defensively. For Kansas State, they've had issues on both sides of the football that have plagued them. Do have a slightly higher defensive floor. The ugly loss of the season for them was obviously to Army, but they did get a nice win last week, and they're a team, it was over UCF, an undefeated UCF. It might not be the best UCF team. They struggled to pull away. Even in that game, just not a ton of confidence building for this Kansas State team. You just get the sense that with this roster and this team, there's just not a lot of confidence is there. I think Baylor still possesses that because of what they've been able to do on offense. Sawyer Robertson, obviously, putting up an insane pace of passing yards. Trigg's been awesome, and they've obviously got skill players across the board there that have really shined for them. It's been defensively where they've had deficiencies. Kansas State can certainly hurt them. They could get into a shootout, but when it comes down to it, if the game's close late, the team that I trust the mental fortitude of just a little bit more is Baylor, especially considering what they went through last season. They started the year like 2-4 and then ripped off a bunch of wins late in the year. It's a lot of the same players in this Baylor team. I could see them doing that again. Air Force versus Navy in a battle one of the armed forces games. Super, super fun game, usually. But this year, I'm not so sure. Air Force did show a spark offensively that they hadn't really shown against Hawaii last week. They still come out on the wrong side of that game. They have shown those offensive sparks. They just have not been able to stop anybody. Utah State ran all over them. Boise State ran all over them. And then Hawaii threw all over them. I mean, it just doesn't really feel like they're going to be capable of stopping Blake Horvath in this well-oiled machine of a Navy offense. We've seen crazier things happen in these games. They're usually pretty close, but in this case, I've got a heavy, heavy lean toward Navy. Boston College heads on the road to play Pitt in an ACC game. Boston College has looked truly awful, lost to Stanford and Cal. Just has not been going well for the Eagles thus far this season. And for Pitt, they haven't exactly been super inspiring either. The loss to West Virginia doesn't look very good in hindsight in overtime. And then they did test Louisville for a little bit. Louisville ends up pulling away at the end of that game last week. Pitt just playing at a higher level right now. Better coach team, more proven team. I think Narduzzi and company get a much needed win at home. If they lose this one, we could genuinely start to hear some Narduzzi hot seat talk, which would be pretty wild because you get the sense that maybe the fan base not too satisfied with the way things have panned out so far this season, even with the end of last season with the losing streak. They got to sort of get it together. I trust they will at home. Army on the road versus UAB, a battle in the American Conference. Trent Dilfer's squad looking for a win that would help things a little bit. It's looked pretty awful. Army hasn't looked great either, but they have shown just a little bit more fight. I'm thinking of that North Texas game where they were able to battle back. I'm thinking of the Kansas State win. So I think Army's capable of getting a win here. Really, their physical play style compared to what UAB has shown, I just don't trust UAB to be in a game like this at all. Again, not a big fan of that administration, the head coach, anything they've really got going on over at UAB. I think Army gets the win there in American Conference play. Iowa State heads on the road to play Cincinnati, a big-time game in the Big 12. Iowa State still undefeated on the season. Cincinnati coming off a decisive road victory against Kansas. And again, the offense really impressing, I think. Not again, actually, I should say, but impressing for the first real time this season against a real opponent, because they did put up some nice numbers versus not great opponents. Nebraska kind of limited them at times. They could not really pass the ball very effectively, but they deliver against Kansas, and they pull off what I thought was a pretty shocking victory. If they drop that fourth down pass, they probably lose that game. And the defense has been really pleasantly surprising. They didn't get a ton of stops in the second half versus Kansas. Kansas was kind of able to have their way, but still, there's been some good stuff. I think back to that Nebraska performance as well. At home, this is a tough game for Iowa State. A quick swing here, and they've had a lot of tough, physical, close games early in the season. Could this be the one that finally breaks them? Obviously, you trust what Rocco Becht has been able to do in late game situations. Iowa State has been very impressive thus far, but I also think back to last season. There was a few critical road games there where they really struggled, and they ended up losing one of them, maybe a couple of them last season. I'm thinking back to the Texas Tech game on the road and a few others where it was in doubt late in the game. So I actually think Cincinnati does it outright and pulls off the upset win. Would be a huge pair of victories for Scott Satterfield, arguably the two biggest of the Scott Satterfield era at Cincinnati, if they pull this one off in addition to the road Kansas win a week ago. Kentucky heads on the road to play Georgia. There's a reputation that Mark Stoops and the Wildcats have for playing Georgia really close, and it's a fair reputation, but if you look back to the history of the game, mostly it happens when they're in Lexington. Doesn't happen a ton in Athens. So I expect Georgia to win this one, especially coming off the loss. Kirby Smart's guys should be pretty motivated and get a pretty emphatic win here versus Kentucky. Wisconsin heads on the road to play Michigan. The Wolverines, obviously, last time we saw them, they had a very nice performance against Nebraska. Just don't see many ways in which Wisconsin can stay in this football game. They have no semblance of an offense. They can't run the ball like they used to. They can't pass the ball effectively. No matter who they throw out there, quarterback does not really matter. Has not mattered under Fickell. I think they lose another one. I think they lose ugly. Could potentially be Fickell's last game. I don't know if they are going to be able to find a way to pony up the money to fire him, but we saw Sam Pittman leave after getting a blowout loss to Notre Dame. Maybe if a similar thing happens to Wisconsin, similar conversations are had. Clemson goes on the road to play North Carolina. This one, another one that looked very attractive as a game a couple of weeks ago. Does not look that way anymore. Both teams have really underwhelmed. Clemson had sky-high national expectations. North Carolina didn't have too high of expectations, but every real opponent they played this year, they've kind of been smushed. Clemson's dysfunctional. Things have been ugly, but they're not quite North Carolina bad. North Carolina is like not able to tackle bad. So I think Clemson gets the win. I've been really disappointed with a lot of elements of North Carolina, and I just think it's another blowout, bloodbath loss. I don't think this is where we see them wake up. Clemson's going to get a win. Be careful. If Clemson gets their feet back under them, they are a dangerous team. They have a dangerous roster, even though it hasn't looked like that thus far. UTSA heads on the road to play Temple. This one, a definite trap game for UTSA. Temple has a solid squad this year. Evan Simon still has not turned the ball over. He's been effective passing the football. If they get into a rhythm early in this game, UTSA could catch themselves in a shootout. UTSA does not have the best defense this season, but what they do have is Robert Henry, who is on one of the best paces of any running back in college football this year. Temple does not have an outstanding defense. UTSA should have no issues moving the ball here. I think they're going to have a really impressive game. You've also got the receiver McEwen. You've got McCown at quarterback. There's a lot of ways UTSA can hurt you, and I think Temple's going to learn that the hard way on Saturday. Wake Forest heads on the road to play Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech, some random sudden signs of life last week with the victory against NC State on the road. Meanwhile, Wake Forest loses a heartbreaker that they arguably should have won against Georgia Tech. I think there's something to be said about the physicality Wake Forest has played with early in these conference games against NC State, against Georgia Tech last week. They've showed something. They've got some fight. The offense has been able to drum up some absolutely great playmaking with Rob Ezell as the offensive coordinator. So there's been some good aspects to this team, but it's just not coming together. And it's just not coming together. I'm going to fall out of my chair here just talking about Wake Forest. And Virginia Tech, after the win, they're rallying around their interim right now, and it's something that's pretty encouraging to see. I think the Hokies get another win at home. It's a talented roster, which is why they fired Pry when they did, because it just wasn't getting done with this talented roster. So give me Virginia Tech to get the home victory and make it 2 in a row. All of a sudden, are we going to talk about a backdoor ACC title run for Virginia Tech? Likely not if you look at their schedule and who they still have to play, but kind of an interesting storyline. Campbell heads on the road to play NC State. Dave Doeren, a just back-breaking loss last week against Virginia Tech. He's got to bounce back. They better. If Campbell tests them, if Campbell, God forbid, beats them, could be some tough conversations had in Raleigh, but I think NC State gets the home victory, gets their feet back under them. The season is still salvageable, but they've got to figure some stuff out defensively for sure. Oklahoma State heads on the road to play Arizona, a game down in Tucson. The Pokes, a team that showed a little bit more fight than they have this year against Baylor last week. They've been continuing to shuffle up the staff, fire people, shuffle things around. A lot of uncertainty. Arizona coming off a humbling loss at the hands of Iowa State last week, ending their undefeated start to the season, but I think they can bounce back. Oklahoma State hasn't shown anything particularly spectacular, albeit maybe just some better offensive movement against Baylor last week. That's not a great Baylor defense. Arizona doesn't boast the best defense in their own right, but should get the bounce back victory versus a team that is just severely more unstable right now. Western Michigan heads on the road to play UMass. Western Michigan has had a couple of inspiring performances in a row. They have the overtime victory, or it wasn't even overtime. They just went for 2 and won it against Toledo. They have the overtime loss in North Texas. They've had some solid performances. I think Lance Taylor's team is actually pretty good. UMass looks awful. I mean, this has just been a disastrous start to the season. Obviously, they weren't very good last year. They were 2-10 last year, with their 2 wins being over FCS opponents. This year, they have no wins. They've lost to an FCS team. Their successes this year are probably most realistically going to be measured by their games versus Kent State and Akron, which unfortunately for UMass are both on the road. This is one they could pull out. Western Michigan hasn't been the most consistent team in the country, but I think the Broncos get it done and get another win in their young season. Next up, we got Oregon State at App State. This is a game I will be at this week. A little bit smaller in scale than some of the other games I've been to, but I think it's really important to showcase all of what college football has to offer. App State has a beautiful scenic stadium. I myself am also an Oregon State fan, so that means a lot to me. Getting a chance to see their first win of the season, that's pretty cool. Not what I hoped or expected to be saying in this game for the Beavs. They came out and they were fighting against Houston, and they end up losing. They looked like the better team, and they lost to the Cougars. And I think that's what's been alarming for Trent Bray. I really think if Trent Bray loses any of these Group of 5 games remaining on the schedule, he should absolutely be fired. I think you got to win them all. At least you got to win all of these Group of 5 games, and then the Washington State games and the Wake Forest game. Those are the swing games. With that being said, headed on the road. Don't love the vibe for Oregon State. It's a tough to go on the road when you're a team that has not won a game yet. But I do think they've just got one more effort left in them that looks decent. I'm not expecting the special team stuff to get cleaned up. I'm expecting some turnovers, but they showed some physicality. They really moved Houston around last week. I think this is the last-ditch effort where Oregon State can go and get it done. James Madison heading on the road to play Georgia State. Georgia State has not shown a semblance of life this season. Another disappointing year. I expect Del McGee, their head coach, to be out after this season. That would be my expectation. Boise State heads on the road to play Notre Dame. This is a college football playoff knockout game. Broncos with an early loss, Notre Dame with a couple. Fighting Irish showed something last week. CJ Carr absolutely shredded that Arkansas defense. I think he can do the same against Boise State, a defense that has been bitterly disappointing this year at times. So I actually think Notre Dame wins this one. I don't think it's particularly close. It is an exciting matchup, though. If the Broncos are in this one late, I should say, it would be really entertaining. I would love that. Miami of Ohio heads on the road to play NIU. It's been a tough start to the season for NIU. It was really a tough year and going to be a tough year for Thomas Hammock given all that NIU lost. Miami of Ohio hungry for that first conference victory. They got their first win of the season last week after some tough, close non-conference losses to a couple of power conference opponents and UNLV, who is still undefeated. So I think Miami of Ohio shows up hungry here, beats NIU, and hands NIU another loss. The Huskies, a lot of their winnable games in conference still on the horizon here. They're just going to have to battle through this early season adversity that they're facing right now. Syracuse heads on the road to play SMU. Not a very spirited effort for Syracuse last week. Ricky Collins getting the start, and I wouldn't be surprised to see some other guys getting a chance this week, especially after that 38-3 loss to Duke. SMU, on the other hand, has definitely had an up and down, and I'd say mostly down season, considering basically all things. The fact that they were in the playoff last year, a couple of early losses, but at home, Mustangs should get back on track with a win over Syracuse. We've got a bowl game, or not a bowl game. I don't know why I wanted to say bowl game, but we got a MAC game, couple of MAC games here. Eastern Michigan at Buffalo, Central Michigan at Akron. Eastern Michigan has been very inconsistent, has not looked great for the most part. I think Buffalo gets a nice home victory after a close loss to UConn. And then we got Central Michigan at Akron. Central Michigan and Matt Drinkel's team have shown a lot. They get the win over Eastern Michigan last week. And so I think they get a win against an Akron team that is not very good. And Joe Moorhead's probably on the hot seat now. He kind of already was headed into the season, but probably even more so. FIU heads on the road to play UConn. The Huskies have been just hot and cold all year long, but I do think they get a win here at home against an FIU team that can be dangerous, but has been a little bit disappointing. They lost at the hands of Delaware last week, and so or a couple of weeks ago now, I think it was, they did beat FAU, which was an encouraging sign, but I think UConn gets the win. Looking for some consistency out of UConn. We have not really gotten that thus far. Texas heads on the road to the Swamp to play Florida. A super intriguing game, one that will be so ugly and so hard to watch. Both defenses are so excellent, and both offenses have been so alarming, and both quarterbacks have played so terribly that I just don't see either team really scoring over like 20 points in this game unless there's like a couple late scores, unless somebody figures it out here. It's really going to be ugly. It's going to be sloppy, and I think that favors Florida. As this game goes on and gets later in the game, if Texas is sputtering and their offense can't figure it out and they're really struggling to move the football, the more that crowd is going to get into it. They are hungry for anything to give them an encouraging sign. I think that Lagway might find a way to wake up this week, but even if he doesn't, I think Florida can get it done just because of the genre of game this is going to be. Arch Manning, Texas, that offense, prove me wrong. Go finally have that performance. But everything I've seen from Florida's defense so far suggests they can have them in this game in the fourth quarter. And if they do, I like Florida's chances at springing the upset with this home crowd backing them. So give me the Gators for the outright upset in the Swamp to give Billy Napier a glimmer of hope, a light at the end of the tunnel that they might be keeping him around somehow, some way. Washington at Maryland. Huskies had an undefeated season going. They lose the undefeated season and a home winning streak to Ohio State in a pretty disheartening loss where, again, it was sloppy. It was close at the beginning. Defense, I think, showed quite a bit for Washington. That was the thing you hoped would improve this year, but the skill players, you can't expect them to perform extremely well in those conditions against that elite of an Ohio State defense. With Maryland, undefeated start to the season. You're welcoming in a team that's coming off a physical game. Now they have to travel across the country. It's advantage Maryland on multiple fronts here, and so they've got a big opportunity ahead of them to keep their undefeated start going. And obviously, Malik Washington's been really awesome to start the season for their offense. They had that nice win over Wisconsin in recent memory. Maryland is absolutely capable of winning this one, and the dynamics at play are really adverse for the Huskies. This is one of those cases, though, where I am just going to rock with my off-season analysis and my guns. I think the Huskies are just good enough of a team. I trust the character of this team enough that even with all the stuff working against them, the long road trip, the tough physical game, the loss, the psychological toll, I think they bounce back. I think Damon Williams and Jonah Coleman and all the aspects of Denzel Boston, this offense, I think they step up. I think they respond, and I think they get a bounce-back victory at Maryland, and they end Maryland's undefeated season. Another one that's pretty exciting, Virginia, now a top 25 team. I believe the number 24 team in the country heads on the road to play Louisville. Louisville coming off a nice win over Pitt, but now they're playing a team that's ranked, and they're not, and they're undefeated. Virginia's not. Virginia lost to NC State. It's just that Virginia beat Florida State last week. I'd be feeling a little bit disrespected if I was Louisville. Virginia's defense, still not very good. They were opportunistic. They were able to make plays, but it's not a good defense in general. And we saw NC State expose them when they played. Louisville is very capable of exposing Virginia's defense as well. Virginia obviously can move the football, but 3 interceptions from Chandler Morris last week. He's not taking care of the ball a great amount, and it's honestly remarkable they pulled out that victory. So I think Louisville ends Virginia's little magical run here. It's only going to end up lasting a week. I think the Cardinals get a nice win, continue their undefeated season, and hopefully for themselves earn a ranking next week with this win. Texas State heads on the road to play Arkansas State in the Sun Belt. What a disastrous start to the season for Arkansas State. Losses to Kennesaw State and the other loss that they just took, don't tell me, it was to ULM. ULM is who they beat. So Texas State, I think, gives them another tough loss. Butch Jones, another one of those coaches from the group of 5, definitely on the hot seat at this point. Kent State travels on the road to play Oklahoma. It's going to be all Oklahoma. Chance to see Michael Hawkins Jr. go to work. Pretty much they could put a ham sandwich at quarterback and they'd win by 60. No offense to Kent State. They have shown a little something this year, but they're still not a very good team. Expect this one to look similar to some of those other games. At least they get their paycheck, though, right? Kent State gets their money for scheduling this game, so that could be on the bright side for them. Next up, we got another Sun Belt game, and we've actually reached nearly the end here. Sun Belt game, Coastal Carolina headed on the road to play Old Dominion. Monarchs have obviously been off to a great start to the season. Colton Joseph and that offense have been absolutely unstoppable. They've been very impressive. They get the nice win over a Liberty team that looks worse and worse each week. They host Coastal Carolina. The Chanticleers have not looked great either. They did have a spirited effort in a win versus South Alabama. Tim Beck still trying to do stuff to get his seat cooled down a little bit. I don't think this is where they get it done. I think Old Dominion continues to shine, gets another nice win, takes out Coastal Carolina. FAU heads on the road to play Rice. This is a battle between a team I really liked in the offseason in FAU and a team that has emerged during the season that I really like now. Scott Abel's Rice team, their offense has been crisp. It's been great. They've looked really nice this season. I believe they lost to Navy this last week, but FAU has just been a little bit disappointing. You can tell they're kind of a year off from maybe being a serious team in the American Conference, especially given some of their other losses they've taken. So I think Rice gets it done. South Alabama headed on the road to play Troy. South Alabama, kind of one of those disappointing teams. You talk about the loss to Coastal Carolina. It's just been sloppy this year. Obviously, they did get hit with some tough portal breaks. They lost Bluff Bothwell. They lost Gio Lopez. They took some tough hits through the transfer portal with some talented guys. And in the case of Troy, talk about a pleasantly surprising team this year. They've really stepped it up in some big moments. They got that nice win at Buffalo. And overall, I've been very pleasantly surprised by Troy. So I'm rocking with the team that has pleasantly surprised me. I think the Troy Trojans get a home victory here and get off to a really nice start to the season for Jared Parker, his second year with the Trojans, trying to get back to those same heights that John Summerall took them to. And before John Summerall, I'm trying to remember who it was there. Was that... it was Neil Brown, I think, before him, which is interesting. But anyways, Texas Tech heads on the road to play Houston. This one, a massive matchup. Both teams undefeated, rivalry game. Houston almost got caught ahead in a look-ahead spot versus Oregon State last week. They end up finding a way to win, but that offensive inconsistency is a real issue, especially against this Texas Tech defensive front. Baron Morton's back for the Red Raiders as well, which doesn't even really change that much. In fact, the offense looked a little bit better under Will Hammond at times, but Morton obviously gives them a ton of great upside as well. I think Texas Tech has no problems here. I think if the game is close and the crowd gets into it, maybe there's something. If there's a will, there's a way. It's a rivalry game, but Houston does not look good enough to win this kind of game, especially after last week's performance. The offense is just a little bit too clunky at this point in the season. Also, Connor Wegman does struggle to take care of the football in games like this, so we'll see if he's able to do that versus Texas Tech. UNLV heads on the road to play Wyoming. Jay Sawvel and company not off to a fantastic start of the season. It's been like a pretty mediocre start, I think. I mean, they beat Akron. I'm trying to remember anything significant about their early season. I can't think of it, which tells me there's probably not much. UNLV still undefeated, though. Tough place to play sometimes. I think they go on the road and they get it done. This one, I think most people would consider to be the main event. Miami at Florida State. We've saved one of the best for last. Big-time rivalry game. Hurricanes still undefeated, coming off the bye. Huge game here. They have delivered in every single big game they've played this year, which has been more than most teams have played. They played Notre Dame, they played South Florida, and they played Florida. They've delivered in all three of those games. In all three of those games, they held their opponent to under 100 rushing yards. And having seen how Florida State just played last week against Virginia, they had to get it done on the ground. They ran for like 250 yards against Virginia, especially because Castellanos was really struggling throwing the football. He turned it over a couple of times. Obviously, I don't think you can really blame him for that one pick that was deflected at the line of scrimmage, but still, it seems like the offense doesn't have as much confidence in Castellanos' ability to pass the ball, which isn't a huge shocker, isn't a huge newsflash, but tells me Florida State's going to try and establish the run against the Hurricanes. And based on everything we've seen from Miami this year and Ruben Bain and that nasty defensive front, they're not going to let you run the football. So if that's Florida State's game plan, and I trust it will be, I really like Miami's chances of getting a nice victory on the road in Tallahassee. I know the last time we saw a big team come in here, it was Alabama, and Florida State made them look silly. But I just think that there's a few cracks in Florida State this year that are starting to emerge, more so than what Miami has. This is still early season Miami. This is in November Miami. This is a early season Mario Cristobal Miami team, so I'm expecting another really excellent performance and the Canes to pull out yet another victory. Mississippi State heads on the road to play Texas A&M. The Bulldogs, a tough, back-breaking loss at home to Tennessee. They coulda, shoulda, would have had it, but just did not pull it out. Texas A&M, on the other hand, still undefeated, off to a nice start of the season. A sloppy performance versus Auburn last week. They just eke out a 6-point victory. They are significantly more favored against Mississippi State. I do feel like the Bulldogs are being a little underrated here, but I understand, based on the dynamics of this one, why people would be lower on the Bulldogs. You know, coming off an emotional loss, now going on the road, there's some things working against them for sure. I still think they're a pretty good team this year, but I am going to lean Texas A&M to get the victory in this one. Kansas at Central Florida. Central Florida, I just don't think it's a particularly good team. They just had a kind of soft schedule to start the season, so I like Kansas to get the victory on the road, bounce back. I don't see UCF being able to stop them very much in this game. Memphis hosts a Tulsa team that has shown a few signs of life. They actually battle against Tulane a little bit, but Memphis has also looked really excellent thus far this season. I think they get another victory here, this time at home, to stay undefeated. And then we've got the nightcap, Nevada at Fresno State. Jeff Chott's team going to try and pull out a victory that not many people can see them getting against a Matt Entz Fresno State team that's off to a nice start to the season. They've won a couple close games and they've done well. So I think they get another one here against the Nevada team that is just battling for anything that they can get early in this season. Probably not a bowl team, but they're going to need to pull out a game or two like this in order for Chott to feel comfortable, I think, when everything's said and done. And then finally, we've got Duke at Cal. Beautiful nightcap in Cal. Of course, it's an ACC game between a team that can see the Atlantic Ocean and a team that can see the Pacific Ocean out their window. Pretty hilarious matchup for that specifically, but I really like the fight that Duke has shown at this point in the season. They've really bounced back from some sluggish starts, a couple tough non-conference losses, so I think Duke keeps it rolling. I think they go at Cal. I think they get a win, and Golden Bears have shown some alarming stuff, specifically on offense, with how things have kind of fallen apart. It's been kind of the horror story that some people, including myself, might have feared this offense could turn into. And so that's it for Cal. They need that win, and we'll see if they get it. I think Duke's going to get it done, but there you have it. My picks for every single Week 6 college football game. Can't believe we're at Week 6 already. It's crazy how the season flies by once we get here, but man, you just got to soak up every second of it. It's super exciting. Like I said, I'll be at Oregon State App State this week. If you're in the area or you happen to be going to that game, feel free to reach out, say hi. If you see me, I always enjoy that. As usual, I'm going to link the Discord down in the bio below. If you want to join that for college football discussion every Saturday and really every day of the week, it's there. I'll link that. I'll link this website as well for you to go tinker around with your own predictions. And that's all I got for you guys. So that does it for this video. I will see you guys next week.